In a dark room in Turin in 1898, a photographer named Secondo Pia lowered a glass negative into a tray of developing solution, expecting nothing more than a faint copy of a faded, centuries-old cloth. What emerged in that tray made his hands shake. The negative showed a clear, detailed, three-dimensional face, a face that the cloth itself, to the naked eye, had never revealed. He had accidentally discovered that the image on the Shroud of Turin behaves like a photographic negative. Centuries before photography existed, and that single detail would launch more than 100 years of scientific investigation into an object that, to this day, no laboratory on Earth has been able to fully explain. This is the story of the Shroud of Turin, one of the most studied and most disputed relics in the history of the Catholic Church. The cloth itself is a large linen sheet over 14 feet long, bearing the faint sepia image of a man who appears to have suffered a brutal crucifixion. Wounds are visible at the wrists and feet. Marks consistent with scourging cover the back and shoulders, and a wound in the side matches the gospel account of a spear piercing Christ after his death. For centuries, believers have venerated it as the burial cloth of Jesus, the very fabric that wrapped his body in the tomb. Its documented history begins in the 1350s, when it surfaced in the small French town of Liry in the possession of a knight named Geoffrey de Charny. From there it passed through the hands of European nobility for 2 centuries before finally arriving in Turin, Italy, where it has remained ever since, housed today in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. For most of its history, the shroud was studied only by eye that changed the moment Secondo Pia developed his photograph in 1898. A photographic negative reverses light and dark, and the image on the shroud, indistinct and shadowy to the naked eye, resolved into a detailed, lifelike positive image once reversed. No artist working in the medieval period had access to photographic negatives, a technology that would not exist for another 500 years. The discovery raised an uncomfortable question. How could a medieval forger have painted an image designed to look correct only when its light values were inverted, centuries before anyone understood what a photographic negative even was? The most extensive scientific investigation came in 1978, when the Vatican allowed a team of 26 American scientists, known as the Shroud of Turin Research Project, direct access to the cloth for 120 hours of non-destructive testing. Their conclusion eliminated the simplest explanations. First, the image was not paint. There was no pigment embedded in the fibers, no brush strokes, no binding medium holding color to the cloth. It was not a scorch, and it was not the result of any vapor or chemical process known at the time. Whatever had created the image, it had discolored only the very topmost fibers of the linen, a layer far thinner than a human hair without penetrating the cloth at all. Blood analysis conducted separately confirmed the presence of genuine human blood. Type AB, consistent with wounds from scourging and a crown of thorns, chemically and forensically distinct from any paint or dye A. Forger might have used to simulate blood, but the shroud story took a controversial turn in 1988 when radiocarbon dating placed the cloth's origin between 1260 and 1390, suggesting a medieval, not ancient, origin. For skeptics, this settled the debate. For researchers who continued studying the cloth, questions remained. Some pointed to the possibility of contamination, noting the sample was taken from a corner of the cloth that had been repeatedly handled, patched, and exposed to fire damage over centuries, any of which could skew radiocarbon results. The debate over that single test continues among scientists to this day, unresolved. What no one on either side of that debate has managed to explain is the image itself. Researchers, including physicist John Jackson, found that the image contained encoded three-dimensional information, meaning the intensity of discoloration corresponded precisely to the distance between the cloth and a body beneath it, a property no painting has ever been shown to replicate. Later experiments proposed that a brief, intense burst of radiation might explain the effect, but no one has identified a source for that radiation, and no lab in the world has fully reproduced the image using any method, ancient or modern. More than a century after Secondo Pia's trembling hands developed that first photograph, the Shroud of Turin remains exactly where his discovery left it. Not proven, not disproven. A cloth that behaves like nothing else humanity has ever studied, still waiting more than 100 years later for an explanation science has yet to find.